Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. Today's episode is one of those episodes that starts out as an on-air coaching call, but turns into a wide-ranging, delicious conversation. I am speaking with Jane from the United Kingdom. She wants to discuss how to deal with the overwhelm of parenting, doing it all, being present, and parenting with emotional wounds. We also talk about how to live a fulfilled life by connecting to your authentic self, finding meaning, freedom, and joy. We even talk about COVID-19 as we recorded this in real time. Please enjoy this inspirational episode with Jane. Jane, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited you're here today.
Hi, Anna. Thank you very much for speaking to me today.
Yes, I am excited to hear yet another English-British accent. I love it. I love it. And we have so many listeners from the UK.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, I'm happy. So, what shall we talk today? What should we discuss? What kind of challenges? Maybe a question that has been bothering you or it's on your mind about personal parenting journeys combined. What's the first thing that you would like to discuss? And what are your expectations? Maybe before we answer those first questions, have you ever listened to any of the on-air coaching episodes?
I have, yes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Do you have a clear idea then how we do, right?
I do, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what is, when you close your eyes for a moment and tune into your body and your inner world, what topic want you discuss today?
Okay. I think I mentioned to you there's quite a bit I'd like to discuss, but really I'm trying to kind of pin down the biggest thing, really. I suppose it's dealing with the overwhelm of parenting, of trying to do it all, be a present parent, and also kind of parenting, I guess, with some emotional wounds as well. So I feel like becoming a parent has really opened up a lot of my emotions and brought up some kind of traumas from my past, really, that I'd buried maybe in my 20s. So yeah, I think it's trying to parent in the best way I can, but being true to myself and not passing on any of maybe some of the negative emotions or behaviours that I've learned over the years, really.
Yes, that's a tall order, right?
Yeah, I know.
I think when I hear you say, I don't want to pass on negative behaviors and negative feelings and behaviors, I feel like, is it realistic? Like, I want to stop for a moment and ask you to really look at that first sentence, right?
Yeah. No, I guess it isn't. I suppose it's being conscious, maybe being more of a conscious parent. And I think another thing that I've realised over the years, and other people have said to me, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm quite a perfectionist, and it's no different in parenting. I think I have very high expectations of myself, and I think a lot of the pressure comes from me. And again, with parenting, I do so much research and reading. I'm very fascinated about child development and emotional intelligence. And I think I read so much, sometimes it just feels a bit overwhelming, all the conflicting information. And I guess maybe sometimes I can almost lose my inner compass a little bit on my own intuition, because I'm so swayed by all the experts' opinions and what's right. And so I guess it's a fine balance, really.
Yes, I completely agree. I also sometimes feel guilty for producing the podcast or putting information out there because I am adding yet, to the noise out there for overwhelmed parents. I sometimes feel that guilt that, and I even recommend sometimes to my listeners who call me and say, I listened to a number of your episodes about trauma and I'm working and I'm struggling. And the first thing I say is, stop listening to my podcast. and I tell them, enough, don't learn about trauma and read books or follow other people. In fact, the opposite. Sometimes it can be overwhelmingly challenging when we learn a lot of information. Then what do you do with it? You are your own healer. You're already overwhelmed. And sometimes it could be re-traumatizing when you are doing this work on your own. I'm thinking of a particular listener who was at the very, very low point when she reached out to me. And I recommended her stop listening to my particular podcast, find comedy podcasts, put a playlist on Spotify that is upbeat and happy. Do the opposite of just learning about trauma, wounds, and healing and journaling and all of that. I think it's a little too much in our culture.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's the element of overthinking things, isn't there, as well? And I agree. I think it's that fine balance. And I've been trying to do more of that recently myself, because I've been fascinated by personal development and self-help really since my late teens and my 20s. And I've always been very fascinated by it. But what I've written, and then parenting's a whole nother level where, again, like we said, I've been reading a lot into it and podcasts, and then, looking at some of my past trauma. And I think it's amazing how many resources are out there. But like you say, you can get overwhelmed. So I've recently gotten back into reading fiction. And I used to love reading, my teens and early 20s. But then almost since I've become a mom, I felt like it's maybe a bit of a waste of time. I'm like, oh, it's a bit indulgent reading this fantasy story when I could be doing something productive. And I've really, really struggled with it. And I've not had much of a concentration span. I've been too tired. And recently I've started reading, it's kind of, I quite like chick lit fiction because it's a bit of escapism for me. And I've recently got back into it, and I love it. And it's a very similar thing that we said. It's that escapism. It's like it can all get a bit heavy sometimes, and it's nice just to escape a little bit and have a distraction. And so I think I found that's helped me recently as well.
Yeah, so I think we have to be action oriented, learning and gaining information upon information about the nervous system and the trauma and developmental it can be so much for an ordinary person, right? And the information is available, and it's kind of addictive because you want answers, but the answers are not enough. You have to do some work, body work, breathing exercises. I find that even coaching, so that you can do actionable things to make your life better, instead of focusing on the negative and digging the wounds and talking about your childhood. Sometimes that's not even necessary for us to cultivate happiness. And in fact, I'm a firm believer as I get older, that's sometimes it's completely unnecessary. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases. And we all bring something from our past, right? And if you dig, you're going to get lost and re-traumatize yourself and feel horrible. And you are alone and stuck. And on top of that, we have responsibilities, motherhood, and the high stress, the life. And now we have coronavirus threats.
I know. And do you know, it feels such a relief to hear you say that, because I think that's how I've kind of gotten myself. And my understanding is that counselling is very much going over your past, and coaching is very much about your future, isn't it? And working towards your future. That's a lot of my understanding. But I've become so wrapped up in all this, going over my past and reparenting and healing trauma, that it feels heavy. And I've also, another level, for a few years now, I've been thinking about retraining and actually going into becoming a counsellor or a therapist or, a psychologist. And that's been on my mind, but I can't quite decide whether, because it is a largely academic route. It's a huge commitment time-wise, financially. I've got 2 young children. And again, there's a little element of me that thinks, actually, because I am an empath, that's something else I've uncovered. over the years, and I actually listened to your podcast with Judith, Dr. Judith, was it? Which was really insightful. And I think my son is an empath too, an empathic child. So, it's really helped me to realise like I'm highly sensitive and empath, because I really do absorb energy and very intuitive. But sometimes I wonder, part of me thinks I'm fascinated and I'd love to help others, but then part of me thinks it's very heavy work, and do I just want to keep it as more of a hobby rather than go into all this commitment in terms of time, money, energy? And I'm a little bit stuck in that sense as well, wondering how to move forward with that as well, whether to go for the career change as well.
How old are your children?
So my daughter was 2 last week, so she just turned 2. And my son is 6 in June, so he's still 5 at the moment.
And, you said in the beginning that some challenges surface for you, triggers, emotional triggers. And of course, parenting is filled with so many triggers, right? It becomes so, our wounds and traumas just come to the forefront oftentimes. And what are those challenges that you are aware of, right? Some of the stuff is unconscious and you may not even be aware of, but what are the things that show up for you and you want to work on those skills, perhaps cultivate the skill on work through triggers?
Sure. Yeah. So mine, I think a trauma that breaks up for me is I lost my dad when I was 15. So that was very traumatic. I was very, very close to my dad. He was a wonderful man, and we lost him quite suddenly. So it was a very traumatic time, and a lot of things happened. So we had his own business. We lost the house a couple of years later. So basically I fended for myself from quite a young age, from about 18. And my mum's lovely. My parents had me a bit later. So my mum was in her 40s and Dad was in his 50s when they had me and my brother. And then I've got older brothers and sisters from their first marriages. And my mum is disabled. So she has quite a lot of health issues. And my dad basically carried my mum a lot, in terms of my dad had a business, and he essentially did a lot for my mum. So my mum was quite stuck, really. So I guess from a young age, we didn't really have that physical support. And also, not to go too deep into it, but this is a lot of the things I've been uncovering. My mum had a very, very traumatic childhood. She was in care. Her mother disowned from a young age. She was beaten, abused. Her first husband abused her. She's had a very, very difficult life. Excuse me, sorry. So I've heard about generational trauma. And again, whether I'm opening a can of worms and going too far into it, but I did actually recently speak to a psychotherapist a few months ago because I was going through a bit of a hard time. And I told her about my past, and she said, from what I told her, it sounds like my mum was quite emotionally unavailable. And it was probably a double hit to me to lose my dad so young, who was like my emotional rock. And my mum didn't really know how to be there. And it's difficult because I feel like my mum, I've always felt very loved by her. She was a stay-at-home mom and she was always there for us. But like the psychotherapist said, we didn't know any different in terms of, how emotionally available she was. You don't always know what's different, what's the normal when you're growing up. So since I've had children, I think what triggers me a lot, and I feel bad for feeling this way, but I feel like a lot of my friends' parents are really involved and they really help out. And I feel like my mum isn't, and she can't be. And when she sees the children, she obviously really loves them, but she can't be hands-on at all, really, because of a disability. She's not in the best of health. She's almost 80 now. But even, at some point, she's not really kind of stepped up and really been there for me where I really needed her. And it's through no fault of her own, but I find it very triggering because my mother-in-law is younger, and I see her with my sister-in-law, how close they are and how hands-on she is with her young child, and, and my friends' parents. And sometimes I just find it difficult because I kind of miss that. It's almost like I want to be parented myself a little bit. Sometimes I just want someone to look after me, when it's hard. And I'm really trying to work on that feeling because I don't think it's helpful. But I think that, I think it has brought up. I didn't expect it to bring up those feelings for me because I've been really independent throughout my 20s, and I didn't have my first child till I was 31, so I was very kind of independent. So yeah, it surprised me a bit, really.
Yes. So how about, I have a bunch of questions, but the first one is, how do you find this emotional availability for yourself, for your children? Is it difficult? Are you able, if you were to assess or view it from a distance, look into your household, or speak from your own experience?
Yeah. See, I find I think I'm very, very loving. Maybe sometimes, again, looking into all the psychology side, I think I've realised I'm probably like anxious attachment. So I think in that sense, I think I'm actually quite anxious, and I think having children has brought up a lot of anxiety for me. And I think maybe overparent in a way, like again, you don't always notice things, but I notice compared to some other mums, I'm really anxious with my children, when they were babies, in case something would happen to them. And I also had 2 very traumatic birth experiences, which I don't think helps. But in terms of being emotionally available, I think, again, in my 20s and when I was younger, I was always very maternal. I've always desperately wanted children. And a lot of family and friends always said, "Oh, you'd be such a great mum. You're so good with kids. You're so maternal." And I think I just expected it to come really natural to me. And while I love them, so much, like with all my heart, sometimes I do struggle and to be there for them constantly, because especially my daughter now. So my son was quite challenging as a toddler, but he's very independent now. And my daughter, she maybe was a slightly easier baby, but as a toddler now, she's so clingy, and I find it so difficult. And especially recently, it just overwhelms me because she needs and wants me all the time. Like, I don't get any space to breathe. And yeah, I find it very, very overwhelming. And I don't know how normal that is. And, my husband, so my husband's 5 years younger than me, but he's very, very relaxed, like very chilled out. Like, from my perspective, I think he's very emotionally sound. He's had quite a good steady life, and he's been my rock, really, since I've met him and since I had the children. But he even though he's very emotionally stable, he says that she's a real handful, and he says she's such hard work. I know he finds it difficult as well.
Well, that age is very difficult for anyone, right? Emotionally draining, and constantly you have to pay attention, and it's quite challenging. But do you? I'm wondering whether you again have high expectations, or because your reality might be different. Maybe you put high expectations on yourself. Do you think in this area?
I do. And I spoke to my brother last night. So my brother's got one child who's a month younger than my daughter, and they've got another one due in the next few weeks. And I spoke to him last night, and I got a little bit upset yesterday. And I do feel like, since I've been doing a lot of this emotional work, I know I said it can be too much, but I feel like it has helped me a bit. And I feel generally a bit more emotionally stable, maybe the last 6 months or so since I've been working on myself, because I think I realised that I'm quite an emotional person, and I can get hijacked by my emotions a lot, and that's what I've been working on. But I spoke to my brother yesterday, and it was about the corona outbreak and everything, and I was saying, that I just found it a bit much yesterday. But also, my husband works a lot of hours, so he's got quite a high pressure job. He's quite senior within like a healthcare IT company. He heads up a big team, so he's the main breadwinner, and he works a lot of hours. So I have the children that I do most of the drop-offs and pick-ups, and I have them on my own quite a lot. And I was speaking to my brother yesterday, and we were talking about it. And especially since the coronavirus situation, my husband's been working round the clock because they're developing new systems, for like remote GP consultations. So it's quite urgent, which I understand, with the situation. But I spoke to my brother and I said, I'm just finding it hard. And my brother said that he had his son for 3 days on his own last week when his wife was away, and his wife struggles, and they've got one. And he's like, me and Kat, we struggle having him on our own. He says, so you have the kids on your own so much, and you've got 2. And he's like, I think you're really hard on yourself. He said, I think you need to step back and look at what you do. He said, from my perspective, you do really well, that you cope with so much by yourself. And yeah, I guess sometimes I do. I think I do put a lot of pressure on myself, and some of my friends say to me like, you do really well having the kids so much on your own. But yeah, I guess I do have high expectations, and it's just hard sometimes, to parent without any support, really.
Yeah, and you have to be your own support. Yeah, that's another point I was going to speak about, especially when you said that the realization that sometimes you compare your mom to your mother-in-law, right? Your mom is physically unable. She has, limitations to be fully available and be the mom or the grandma that you wanted to be. I can totally relate to this because I don't have a mom. And so I feel the jealousy, the lack, the sadness, the loss, not all the time, but sometimes it's so severe that, I feel like I want to curl up and cry like a little kid. And I want that care for myself. And it's sad. It's a loss. There is the jealousy, and that's always going to be part of our story. Uh, Sadly, we can't do anything. We can't change. We can't kick and scream and yell and get angry all the time, right? It's important to feel all those emotions, but also cultivate some self-compassion. I think we have talked a lot on the podcast about self-compassion exercises and breathing. And Kristin Neff has developed a self-compassion questionnaire on their website. You can take and see how self-compassionate you are. I think self-compassion can help in those situations when you feel like you want someone to be there for you. And because motherhood is all about giving and feeling drained and empty and no support, and on top of that you have those other feelings. What are you doing with that? Just feeling the feelings and acknowledging them, I think, is not enough. Cultivate a self-compassion practice. I would highly recommend learning a little more how to do that, whether you give yourself a hug in that moment, hold yourself. And we talked about self-compassion. It has 3 elements: mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. It's not self-pity. You're not going to self-pity yourself and say, oh, poor Jane, or oh, poor Anna, look at you, you're struggling. But no, it has different elements. And I think with time, being cognizant and mindful of this, when those situations rise, when you feel challenged and jealous or angry and sad, cultivate a self-compassion practice. I think that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Mhm.
Lovely. Yeah, I know it's good to hear that. I've not really looked at it from that angle, I guess, or thought of that. I think sometimes as well, I feel guilty for feeling that way. And it's great to hear you, you're obviously a coach and an expert in this area. When you said that you feel that way yourself, and, I've heard that saying, what we resist persists. And I think quite often I berate myself and I feel like a bad person for feeling this way. And I try so hard to almost banish these feelings and emotions, and I think, God, I'm a spiteful person, that I feel jealous of people's relationship or people that have their mums. And, it's something I really try to work on getting rid of. So it's quite liberating to hear you say that that's part of our story, and, you feel it too. And I think we've got to accept it, maybe not like live in that emotion, but accept that that's going to come up for us, I guess. And it's normal that way.
It is. And see, your father passed away when you were 15. I mean, my father is alive, but he's not here. So I don't interact with him. My daughter doesn't see him. So I feel like that's a loss for me too. When I deeply think about my situation too, I am parenting without my parents, and I wish they could have witnessed and been there for me. And sometimes I hit rock bottom and I'm like, how I wish I had my mom just to ask her this one question and not feel judged, because sometimes I can't share that particular thing that I'm struggling with a close friend. It's not the same. And it's very sad. I allow myself to feel the sadness, to cry in those moments. I look at my mom's picture. I write in my journal, just free flow, like writing. And and allowing myself to be in that space a little bit. But then, I collect myself, and then I gain a perspective and I move on with my day. And then it comes again. And especially the trigger for me is when I see my friends who have their mothers and they treat their mothers poorly. And when I witness that dynamic, I become very angry and jealous. And I noticed also I become very friendly with their mothers. And it's not good. And, I know my own patterns too. So self-compassion, in those moments where things rise for you, when you feel that, when you compare and you feel the jealousy, be with that, cry about it. I say, I wish it was different. You have to make peace with the reality. As one of our former podcast guests, he said it so well. I have made a short audio clip from Oren J. Sofer's episode about mindful communication. He said that we have to accept what's available in that particular relationship. It's so hard to do because we want more always from our partners, from our friends, from our children, from our parents and grandparents. But he says, can you look inside that relationship and really accept what's available and say to yourself, this is what's available here, and I accept things as they are. It's very heartbreaking too, because you realize that loss and sadness and anger. But I think when you experience that and make peace with that, you slowly will be more at peace inside.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. You touched on before about getting close to your friends' parents, and you can see your patterns. And I used to be very, very close to my mother-in-law. Again, I think sometimes you're trying to replace what you're missing. And then with my son, she looked after him a lot, but we did end up having a couple of run-ins. I think maybe, just boundaries got crossed, and that was all quite upsetting. And I think, we've got a relationship now, but it's definitely not like it was. And it's just learning to keep those boundaries, because I guess in some ways I was treating her like my mom, and ultimately you can't really do that. And it's just a learning curve. And it is difficult. And I think sometimes I think an emotion that surprised me with parenting and that I've got more used to, but I think it surprised me how lonely it can be. Yeah, I don't think you ever expect it to be lonely, really, do you, before you become a parent? But I suppose the nature, and I guess I don't think it's always helped by social media now. And I try to have quite a healthy relationship with social media now. I try to step back from it when I'm feeling that way. But, sometimes it feels like everyone's out there doing these amazing things, and everyone has millions of mum friends, and everyone's got lots of people around them. And I feel like I've always been very social, especially in my 20s. And as time's gone on now, I've moved around a bit, and I've got probably a handful of really close friends, and I've got some acquaintances and like a couple of mum friends and things. But ultimately, I think I realised when you're an adult and you work and you've got children and everyone's got their lives, you just can't have the same kind of social life that you used to have. Yeah, and it's all...
That's another loss. That's another loss. I think motherhood and parenthood is filled with losses right from the beginning. When you first, you lose your youth, you lose your previous status, you lose even when you move from one child to the second one, it's yet another loss. I mean, people don't think about those things. I often talk about this, and my friends say, "Oh, you're so morbid," but that's the reality.
Yeah,
right.
And I think there's an expectation that it's going to be filled with joy. So I think, obviously there are many joyful moments, but like you say, all these losses, nobody really talks about that. The loss, it's all about the joy and the gain. And, so I guess sometimes it can feel like there's something wrong with you, for feeling that way. And things change. It's like, I'm not sure if you feel the same, but what I've noticed over the years, I think naturally as you have children, you do assess your friendships and relationships and sometimes cut off people that are not particularly right. And what I've realised in the past, I used to I'd be much more kind of happy-go-lucky and casual, and I was always very social, and I didn't expect as much from my friendships. It was more about, having good times together. And I think now it's like the friendships I have, they've got to be, I know you can have different friends for different situations, but they've got to be meaningful. Like, I don't have any time to waste with just a social buddy. It's got to be more of a meaningful, because that little bit of time that you do have occasionally to spend with your friends, you want to kind of spend it with the right people and make the most of it. So like you say, it just changes. Things become more meaningful, and you just have to streamline a lot of your life, don't you? But there are times, I guess, that, even when I see old pictures of myself and my husband and me and my friends, and you look back and you think, gosh, I was so carefree.
Yes. And you feel like, wow, I was looking at the old pictures recently too. And I'm like, boy, we did have a life before our daughter was born. and our identity shifts, right? Tremendously. Again, a transformation. Some parts of our identity get lost. And what you're talking about is really important, because when we were carefree, when we were with our friends before we had kids, right? We were ourselves. We were enjoying the fullest life, and we were ourselves, and we were happy. When you become a mother, so much responsibility is placed upon you, and you can't be that self anymore. So automatically those parts shut down, or you disconnect, and you can't hang out with those friends anymore. But I think that's the challenge, to remind yourself that all parts of you are still part of you. They are there. They're waiting to be awakened. What can you do today to access those parts? Perhaps, maybe not having carefree parties with friends, but finding a hobby, finding something that will give you that freedom of expression, something that brings you joy and ease and fun. I think the motherhood, the parenting in general, I don't want to exclude fathers, but the heavy load of motherhood falls on the mothers, right? It's primarily mothers are still the main caregivers. And I hear this a lot. So I think intentionally we have to create our own reality, our own happiness. It's not going to be the same. We're not going to find carefree friends and travel. That's not going to happen. But the feeling that we used to get from those experiences, what were those feelings? Creativity, self-expression. I'm not sure what those are for you. Maybe reflect on that and say, what parts of myself I have either lost or are hidden. I don't think they're lost completely. I think they're part of us. Like for me, doing this podcast is helping me to connect with that part of myself that got hidden in the burden of motherhood, and I do other things too. And I noticed that I'm a lot happier when I access those parts of myself and I use my skills or characteristics, and it's different. It's a different flavor. It's a different dynamic, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. I totally understand. And I have been trying to kind of work on that. Like you say, it just looks differently. Like you say, like now I might only see my friends socially without the children every 2 or 3 months. But, now we'd go out for lunch and maybe not even drink. I might have one wine, or we'll have lunch and a chat. And it's like really nourishing, rather than I'm not really that interested in going out in the evening, like drinking lots of alcohol anymore. And I did still go out quite a bit after my first son. I think after my first child, we did actually have more childcare available then. But I've really tailed that out with my daughter. So it's just different interactions. I'm really keen. I love being outdoors with the family as well. But I guess you're saying bits for yourself. So one thing that I've done, which is a non-negotiable now, is I go to a yoga class every Monday evening for an hour and a half. And I've dabbled in yoga for years. And when I had my son, I used to just be very non-committal. I'd always find an excuse. I'd get ready to go and then I'd be tired and I'd say, I could be doing this at home. But now, I've realised how good it makes me feel. And again, I think having 2 children, like how many children do you have, Anna?
I just have one.
You've got one. Yeah, well, from my experience, going from 1 to 2, I mean, motherhood's so, so hard, but with 2, I found it's just relentless. Like, I have such little energy because it never ends. And another thing I forgot to mention is my daughter is a terrible sleeper.
Mm.
So she's just turned 2, and she's never slept through. She wakes constantly through the night. Myself and my husband have to get in with her most nights, and it's just really, really worn us down. So that's another thing. So I'm torn between trying to create these pockets for myself, because like you say, I know it's very important, but literally, when we put her down at night, it takes probably till about 8 o'clock to get her off. She doesn't settle well. By the time she goes down, I've got a few jobs to do, and then you're just so exhausted because she's up at 5:30 in the morning. She doesn't sleep through. I also work part-time as well. So I just keep thinking, I keep thinking that one of the analogies I like about parenting, it's just a season of your life. They're all seasons. And I know that, but then part of me also feels like I'm trying to rush through it. I'm just trying to get through this season of parenting and wish it away almost. And, my husband and I, we talk regularly about, because we find our son so much easier now. Like, he has little challenges like, all children do. I guess it's new challenges as they get older, but on the whole, he's so much easier. And we keep saying, we can't wait till our little girl's that age and things will be easier. But then it's like you're wishing it away, isn't it? And it's just that we feel almost like we're just in survival mode a little bit at the moment.
I think that's quite, having a toddler and a preschooler, it's give yourself some grace and patience, and, have perspective that this too shall pass. Trust me, it changes so much, and have that perspective that this is just temporary. Nothing is permanent in life. And thank goodness for that. And so what can you enjoy now that can be enjoyed? And just to solidify the point that we're talking about, what feelings you want to recreate for yourself, that when you were carefree and young, right? A sense of freedom, creativity. Maybe make a list of those feelings that you want to feel now in your motherhood, and say, how can I achieve that? It could be a long walk by yourself. Maybe gives you that sense of ease and carefree and all that. But in the past, that sense of ease and comfort you would get from a company of friends when you were road tripping. Well, that's not available, but I think you can recreate the feeling. That's what I want to suggest. Before we move a little forward, there's 2 things I want to give you a writing exercise. I think writing exercises are great in terms of, we spoke about your mom, the jealousy, the sadness, not being available, that sense of loss. Maybe think about this question, what's available for me in this relationship, and just write from your heart, stream of consciousness writing. Think about this topic today and say what's available, because there are some things that are available that are valuable, and say, what am I grateful for that I have my mom, even though there are lacks and she is limited in giving me. Because if you focus on what she's not able to give, then you know what I mean? It's not so helpful. But instead, be more realistic and have this sober view and write about what's available as a reminder, and say, I am grateful that she's alive and I can FaceTime with her daily. Whatever is available, you be grateful for that. And maybe another thing would be a bit of a fun exercise. You could do, what do I miss about myself when I was young? What are the things that I miss? And maybe make a little collage of pictures to remind you who you were before. A road trip picture, maybe a social gathering picture, a few major emotions that you remember from your past, who you were. Make a little collage and put it somewhere that you can always look and say, I am that same person today. it's not lost. It's part of you. How can I access that girl, that carefree, that humorous, whatever parts of you are there? I think when I met with my friend, I met with my friend of my childhood and my youth. We hadn't met for a long time. For 12 years we hadn't met, and within those 12 years we had married, we had children, and we met with our families for the first time. It was very interesting to meet my childhood friend, this carefree, right? We remember each other differently. What I noticed about her was she was very different. She was not the same person. She was very protective, very maternal, very, very different, and somewhat very aged. And her body was also changed. I couldn't recognize my dear friend. What she said to me was, "Wow, you haven't changed." And I thought about that a lot. And when I look at our pictures from that trip, there's a significant difference. I look different and a lot younger and a little different, more close to when I was younger, pre-children, than she. And so I think about this topic a lot. And so I believe that I am trying to preserve those parts of myself and to remain true and authentic to myself, because it's important. Um, and so I think if we lose that, then it's not so good.
No, definitely not. No, I'm actually told that quite a lot as well, that I look a lot younger than I am, and a lot of people think I haven't changed a lot. So I suppose it's a good thing, isn't it? That you managed to.
It is, because we gain life experience, we age, but I believe that our true essence always remains the same. And not to hijack this conversation, I recently found a letter that I wrote when I was 17. So this letter is 30 years old. I sent it to someone, but it didn't reach the person, and it came back to me. And I found it. I read it. I was reading to my friends because I was in shock that I have not changed, not one little bit. It says, these are my positive traits, these are my negative traits, these are my fears, these are my likes, dislikes. It's the childish sort of letter. But when I read it, as if I wrote it today, I'm like, wow, even the things that I thought about, the principles, it's the same. So we really, I think our core essence is always with us, that authentic essence. So let's not forget that. You're right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say, actually, it's a little bit different, but I found a journal from like 10 years ago recently. And, a lot of it was like my goals and my dreams. And I think it was not long before I met my husband. Me and my husband have been together for nearly 9 years now. And it's exactly the same thing. That was pre-children, pre-marriage. But actually, a lot of my goals and dreams were exactly the same. And, a lot of the things that I'd kind of planned and hoped for actually happened. And, sometimes you look back and you can always smile and think, wow, I did achieve a lot of what I set out to do. And yeah, it's just taking a step back and remembering sometimes that, what we have now is what we dreamed of once, in the past, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So, if you were to summarize this point, what is your takeaway from this, from the last part of this conversation that we're having?
The last part in terms of kind of keeping the essence of myself, or like, yeah. So, like you're saying, I suppose the key points is to remember that to try and recapture the essence of who I was before, and the feelings that I sometimes miss and feel like I'm lacking, to try and remember those feelings and find a way, like a new way with children, to be able to practice those or still live those moments or that feeling, really.
And you know what? I just had this realization that 20 years from now or 30 years from now, we're going to look at this phase of our life and have those same feelings of loss and sadness when our children leave the nest or when they get married. It's just a cycle of life, I think, and it's all right, right? It makes it okay.
It does. And like you say, I think we know that, don't we? Although, that, I love that saying where it says the days are long, but the years are short. I think it's so true. And I think we all know, don't we, deep down, we all know logically that one day we're going to crave for this time now. And, most of the next generation, our parents, grandparents, they always talk, I know my mum always talks about how the happiest time of her life was when we were young. And I know she really craves it, and a lot of parents do. So I think we know like we're going to miss this stage, but when you're in it, it can feel like it's never ending. When you're in it, it does feel like the days are long a lot of the time. So it's just, I suppose it's trying to get that balance. And like I said, that analogy, I do try to think about the season thing, like you say, it's cycles and seasons and nothing is forever. And it's just realizing that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think when you realize that, I mean, I do have a bit of a dark, morbid side to myself. My friends always comment and say that, but I think it gives me sobering perspective. It focuses me and orients me, and it drops me into the present moment. Like with the coronavirus thing going on, it reminds me of the time post earthquake, and where there was no food, no shelter, no water, no nothing, no people, and the chaos and the anxiety and the panic and the not knowing what's going to happen next, the uncertainty. This reminds me of that time. And even though I have this elevated level of anxiety and I'm sort of triggered because it reminds me of my past experience, I'm also comforted in knowing that this is going to pass. This is impermanent. And so that gives me a little bit of comfort and perspective to survive the current situation.
And I guess you probably know that you're resilient, because you've lived through one of the worst things people can go through, and you've lived through a disaster before, and I guess it probably gives you a little bit of, that you're resilient as well, don't you? And that you can get through these times.
Hopefully, right? I mean, you don't want to lose your hope. When you lose your sense of hope, I think you end up in despair, and that's not a good place to be.
No, and it's I think at the moment the situation, it's the unknown that's quite frightening for everyone, isn't it? It's just very uncertain, I suppose.
It's completely, yes. And somehow our mind goes into the negative, but there are so many positive things that we can do today and enjoy life today as we have our life and our health, and pray for those who are suffering and extend that compassion. I think that's my wish and in my thoughts every day. That's what I do. I get up and I'm grateful for what we have, and I also pray for those who are suffering. And I know this is going to end someday.
Yeah. And also, I suppose another way to look at it is, none of us are ever in control of our life, of the future, really. We like to think we are. And this is highlighting it. And my husband said earlier, because I said it's crazy how everything's just crashing down, the economy and everything so suddenly, so unexpectedly. And he said it's a big reminder of how fragile life is, which it is. But also, I think we all like to feel like we're in control of life and the future, and we're not, And this is like an extreme situation, but ultimately, like you say, as morbid as it sounds, any of us could, get run over by a bus tomorrow, or fall ill. Nothing's permanent, and nothing's guaranteed, is it? And I guess while you have your health, you don't always appreciate it until something happens. And I suppose your perspective is probably different because of your experience. And I feel like with losing my dad so young, I think it changed my perspective on like mortality. I think it made me realise that actually, I think before that I felt invincible, like nothing would ever happen to me or anyone I love. And I think when you've experienced loss like that, I think it makes you realise, doesn't it, how fragile life is? And
yes.
You look at it
completely. Yeah, I lost my mom when I was 13. So you lost your father when you were 15. It's a tremendous loss, because you are shaping and you're developing. You're not a formed human being completely, and so it completely leaves such big imprint in who you will become. It's defines your personality in a lot of ways. So, how do you miss your dad? Do you allow yourself to be, do you remember him? Do you wish he was here? Do you have thoughts like that, or it's completely like you compartmentalized and moved on?
I feel like because, now it's been, gosh, I'm nearly 37, so it's been over 21 years, nearly 20, 21 years it's been. So I'm sure you can relate to this, but I feel like in the years after he died, I don't even know how many years, but, probably for at least 5 years, and then into my 20s, I feel like I really, deeply mourned for him. And we all did, and he was, still such a big part of our life, and, talked about him, and I wrote poems and all sorts about him, and he was very much, it was a long grieving process. And I feel like as the years have gone on, like I say, it's been so long now, I think he's always with me in my mind, but it's definitely not at the forefront of my mind anymore. I guess it's always at the back of my mind, but I don't talk about him that often anymore. Like I do sometimes with family, and certain things come up and remind me, but yeah, it feels like it was another lifetime, because I've lived now, 16 years longer without him than I did with him. So it is difficult. So I've got such amazing memories of him, and he taught me so much, and he was such an amazing man. But it feels like another lifetime now, since all that happened and he was here. It is a bit surreal.
It is, yes. But so in your present parenting, then, with all the things that we have discussed, what would you like to change in terms of the emotional availability? And you know what? Here is the thing. From research, this is what we know, that if you are attuned to your children and loving, and you meet their needs 30% of the time, not 70, not even 50, 30% of the time, you are a good enough parent. And we also know that it's not only parenting that shapes our children. You could be the best parent. You can attune and care and give everything to your children. Will it have the outcome that you hoped for? Chances are no. So it's not in our control as much as we think it is. So let's all collectively put that pressure aside. I grew up in horrific circumstances without the mother, and almost without being parented for several years. I'm not suggesting, let's do that, like neglect our children, but we don't have as much influence as we think we do. So loosen the grip, get rid of the illusion that you have, you can influence your child, who they will become, what they will do. Just do your best today, 30%. And enjoy as much as you can. Not every moment can be enjoyed, right? There is that book, right? All joy and no fun.
I know. Yeah, no, it's really refreshing hearing you say that, because I think, again, I look at the way my husband parents and the way I parent, and I see the difference, because I mentioned my husband's so like carefree and laid back and fun, and and he puts so much into his work. He's so career driven. So he's got, like I say, really high power career, but also, when he's home, and I suppose it probably is a novelty to the kids, but the kids adore him, and he's so present, and he plays, and he's fun. And, I look at the way we parent, and he doesn't worry, he doesn't worry about things like I worry so much. I don't know, it's that mum guilt, so I only work 18 hours, and I'm with them so much, and I do a lot. And, like I said, I don't have much help, but I have my daughter. The nursery hours are between 7:30 to 6:00. And I always make sure I pick her up by 4:00, 4:15, because I feel guilty leaving her in any longer. I'm like, oh, it's a long day. And my husband said, if it was me, I'd pick her up at 6:45 and, go home and do the tea. And little things like, I have so much guilt over things, and what you were talking about, that over information. A lot of the podcasts I listen to, and some of the books, and I also so I'm a marketing and communications manager for a family support charity, and we do a lot of work around parent-infant mental health, a lot of like studies, and so I've been exposed, and I find it fascinating that I've been exposed to so much information. And I'm not sure if you've heard of 1001 Critical Days, where it's so it's saying the first 1001 critical days of a child's life are critical to the whole future, and the impacts of their relationships, and it's massive. And there's so much kind of information and research into how everything you do like shapes your child, and you're so responsible. And that's like kind of thrown around now. And I know it depends how much you consume it, but that responsibility is huge, and I really take it seriously. And I took a bit of time out of work at one point, and I still feel guilty. And I'm so torn, because I feel like since having children, I feel like it's really sparked my creativity massively, and my career drive, and I've got all these passions that I want to do, but I feel like I should be here. And I run a lot of the household, so I do a lot of the like life admin, the shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, the washing. We do have a cleaner once every fortnight, but I carry a lot of the housework as well. My husband is great. He is in many ways. He's not very domestic. So it's another whole angle to look at it. But also I feel like I'm quite overwhelmed by our life. So we moved house a year and a half ago to a bigger house, and we have a lot of clutter. We're both like, have a lot of clutter, and the children have a lot of clutter, and we keep trying, especially me, to like declutter and get everything organized. And I have this image in my head that once I finally get to this organized life and the house I want it, and functional and decluttered, I feel like my life would run so smooth. But in reality, I only have time just about for daily maintenance, like the washing, the cooking, keeping daily maintenance. And we're still trying to do DIY as well. And I just get frustrated because I don't really have time without the kids where I can just have this big declutter of the house. And that's always, I get stressed by it. It really raises my anxiety, but my husband doesn't understand. It doesn't bother him. Like, he's quite messy, or mess or clutter doesn't really bother him. And it just drives me crazy. And that's another thing, it sounds silly, but that I think if I had systems, or I feel like if I had a month or so, where I could have time just to get the house straight, I'd be so much more organized and less overwhelmed as well.
Are you sure about that? Imagine, I think then you can't live in this hermetically, clinically set up environment. Then that's not living, right? You can create a little room or corner in your home where everything is calm and organized, minimalistic, that gives you a sense of order or comfort, and retrieve to that corner when you feel overwhelmed. You could hire help to help you with those things that give you that sense. But we all know that's not going to give you what you're seeking. So what kind of feeling would you get from that? If, let's say, you had children are away, you have 1 month, you organize, deep clean, deep clutter. What's the feeling that Jane is going to feel?
I feel like I would feel much more in control, much more relaxed, much more organized. I feel like my life would be in order. That's how I feel. Like I'm always kind of pushing to this end goal, and like, if only, and I get so frustrated, and like say my husband completely isn't on the same page. And I think I've realised I am a perfectionist, and I kind of strive maybe sometimes, for unrealistic expectations in my life. And I think that's one of them. I think it's this vision in your head that, if you get to this end point, everything will be easy and it'll be the solution. But then I guess the issue with that is you're never quite happy in the present moment. You're always looking ahead, aren't you?
You're always chasing that, and you will never find that happiness. Even if you find that 1 month and you organize and clean up and organize everything, you will not still be happy. This is something else. You said you would feel in control, like your life would be organized and orderly and relaxed. So how could you feel like this with a given situation? Can you create experiences to feel relaxed? And what's the priority? What's the hierarchy of your needs? Right? What are your current needs? Having control, organization, order. Does that give you a sense of comfort, autonomy, that you are in charge of something, that you are still powerful? I'm just curious to look underneath those things and see.
No, it's interesting as well. I know you said about chasing happiness, because I know that's something I've been through quite recently quite, what's the word, where, you're thinking about a lot of things in your life, coming to a conclusion. So this again is another topic, not to go too far off tangent, but for years, so we bought a house 5 or 6 years ago in an area, so it's like a suburb about 6 miles out of town. And, we've got like a nice big house now, and we've got a tram right into town. It's ideal. It's, quite a decent area. But for years, I've always thought of living in this lovely little perfect village where it's a bit greener, like there's loads of community. And I feel like maybe throughout my life, and my brother, he said this to me quite a few times, and I spoke to a few friends recently. They said that sometimes it feels like I'm always chasing something. And my brother always says, it seems like, he says, from the outside, he sees that I've got this wonderful husband, lovely children, a beautiful house. And it's like I've got everything, like, on paper that looks great, but I'm always chasing something. It's like I'm never quite happy, like whether it's another job and career fulfillment. And that's something I've been working with. I don't know where it comes from, but I think there's something that I feel like there's always another goal. If I reach this, I'll be happy. And there's always something inside me that's a bit unsettled. And it's a strange one. It's like I can never just feel. I am really working hard at it, to try and feel content in my life. But I wonder if it's down to ambition or drive. I don't know what it is. It's like I'm always chasing more. Like I'm always wanting something to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the perfectionistic nature, it's the expectations and the performance trap that you fall into. It's your anxiety and stress levels are high because of being in this season of motherhood and having no support. It's a combination of all things, the losses that you carry in your heart, and you have not consolidated and made peace with all parts of yourself. It's the loss that you lost yourself in motherhood and this carefree. It's everything that we are talking about and some more stuff that we haven't even touched upon. So have you tried meditation in terms of easing your anxiety and being okay with what is, grounding exercises? I think that would be helpful. Writing, journaling, stream of consciousness writing is also good. I think connecting to your essence, to your authentic self, and saying, how do I want to feel in my life, in my, what are the feelings that I'm missing? How can I recreate those feelings? Will give you that happiness, because ultimately that's what happiness is. Happiness is when you come to yourself, when you connect to your true nature, because all those things are external, fleeting. If we depend on those factors for happiness, we're doomed to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Right?
No, yeah. No, you're right.
And so I think you are in more existential, philosophical stage of your motherhood, which is great. I love this kind of stuff. It's a good exploration time. And you said you love to write. You used to write poems. Maybe write poems or prose. Have a little creative outlet and process your inner feelings and the losses and all those things through creative outlet.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say it's another thing, probably down to the perfectionist trait. So when I was younger, going back to things stay the same. So I adored writing as a child. From a very, very young age, I adored writing stories, poetry, through school. And I was always told I was very good at it. My poems, my stories would always be like in reception, on the walls at school, in competitions. And then as I got older, I used to write poems for all my friends, and I knew I had a real talent for it. A lot of people said I did. And then I dealt with it. I used it a lot to deal with my dad dying, a lot of the emotions. And kind of one of my dreams was always to be an author, or I used to want to be a journalist. And then I can't, in my 20s, I went into the corporate world and I had to kind of make a living. And I think I quashed a lot of that, the writing and my dreams, really, the creativity. I had a bit of a creative block. And then when I had my son, I started writing a blog, and I got a lot of my I used it again to vent my emotions, and I got a lot of my creativity back. And I had a blog and I updated it a lot, but I went quite deep with, some of the issues I was going through with a traumatic birth and the struggles of motherhood. And I got some really good feedback from people, saying it really helped them. And then I just had a massive wobble, and I felt like I was oversharing. I thought, gosh, I'm putting all my deepest emotions on the internet, and I deleted it all. And I had a dream of freelance writing, and I wanted to do freelance writing, and something was holding me back. Again, I felt like because it wasn't perfect, because I hadn't, got it published, or got, all these millions of people weren't following my blog, or I don't know. I feel like because it wasn't good enough, I couldn't do it. And I've been grappling ever since, and I've set up numerous websites for to become a freelance writer, and I've submitted a few articles and they've been published, but it feels like because I'm not doing it brilliantly, I can't do it at all. And and it's right what you're saying about, right. And that's what I've done recently. I've journaled for myself the last 6 months or so, just my inner feelings, because no one can see it, and there's no critique, judgment, or, pressure on myself. But actually, as well, because I've kind of created a career for myself. So I work in marketing, where I write content for a living as well. I write especially about things I'm passionate about. So I've really cultivated that in my career, really, which is brilliant, something that I love. But there still is burning desire inside me to really share my writing and my experiences. But I think have a fear of being judged, of sharing too much with the world. And it's really, really sad, because actually I get so much, like we said before, from these podcasts, from writing, from reading magazines, articles, blogs. It gives me so much. But yeah, I'm not comfortable enough to kind of really share it. I don't know what it is. It's like maybe some sort of insecurity, or fear of being judged.
This is a fantastic topic. We can do an entire episode on this, and it just keeps you in your tracks, and you never. The fear of judgment, if we listen to that, if I were to listen to that, we would never have this podcast. Believe me, I get criticism. I remember when I first got my review, somebody posted a negative review. I was heartbroken, and I was crying for a week. Now I developed a thicker skin, because it's not about others, it's about you. What you believe in, what you share, your passion, your compassion. And it's okay. We're all human, and some people will judge us, but it's not about us. It's about them having something difficult. Maybe it triggers something in other people. So, we always think that things are about us, that they are not. Have you listened to episode 214? It's a coaching episode with Jackie. It's called The Performance Trap of Modern Parenthood. I love that episode. I think I find similarities in your stories. How can you lessen the pressure? I think that's the main thing. How can you lessen the pressure? When you have a little pocket of time for yourself, make the most of it. And when you are with your children, you don't have to be 24/7 with them to be a good enough mom. Dedicate an intentional pocket of time and say, this is the time for today. If you're able, if you're not able that day, it's all right too. The 30% of the time, if you're good and attuned, and I'm positive your children are very well cared for, very loved and nurtured. And so how can you lessen that pressure, and how can you put yourself out there and with fear? Every time you do something like that, you get outside of that comfort zone. And I speak from personal experience too. When I first spoke in front of a large audience, like 300 people, I was like, wow, what are they going to say? Including my talk, the topic, the way I speak, the way I hold the microphone. They're going to judge my clothes. They're going to judge my hair. But now I am so comfortable, because it's all right. Some people will judge and some people will embrace, and we can't please everyone. But being stuck in that trap is no good either, because your soul, your essence is yearning to soar and create and live and be happy. And don't let other people or the external sources compromise your own authentic happiness. I am living this way now too, and I am not afraid. It's okay. If you're going to judge me, that's fine. It's fine. I'm learning this myself, this very lesson. So, and I know how powerful it is
Yeah. And
Uh, yeah.
do you, with your experience, the more you do it, the more confident you become?
The more confident I become, and I don't get what I fear most. It never happens. It's always in our heads that people are going to judge. The opposite happens. I just spoke last week to like 400 people, and so many people came, and with this coronavirus, they were hugging me. They were like, it was phenomenal, it was phenomenal. And I'm like, wow, you go with fear, you stand in front of people, and sometimes they look at their phones, they're not looking at you, they're not nodding you, there's no feedback. But it's amazing. I think stop worrying about others and how they will perceive. Do the thing anyway, because it's about you, your growth, your expansion, not about others. And when you live like this, not only you become happy and fulfilled deeply, but you also give permission others to do the same. Because my friend is watching me, and she and another friend, they say, wow, I want to be like you, you're so happy. And that is the secret. There is no secret. I'm just a flawed human being, and I embrace that.
Yeah. And it's I suppose it's inspiring, isn't it? It inspires other people as well. And I
Hmm.
think maybe that's part of why I do feel this something, this need to push or pursue. I think because deep down I know that I'm playing small, and I know that I have a lot more to give, but fear is holding me back. And I think I get frustrated at myself, and it's just being bold. And there's been a few examples recently where I have stepped outside of my comfort zone. So, like, because I feel in some ways professionally I did step back for a good few years when I had my children, because I felt like you couldn't be a good mom and have a good career, and I went through all that in my mind. And now I'm kind of mid-par with my career, but I feel like I've got so much more to give. And a few things recently, like I was on a radio interview recently. I went to like a women leading in business networking event last week, and the things that I'm pushing myself up for, and it's quite nerve-wracking, but actually like I'm scared and I almost want to back out of it. I'm like, oh, I can't do this. And then when I've done it, that feeling's so exhilarating, isn't it? When you
It's
push through it.
growth. That's the
Yeah,
growth.
yeah.
When you're stuck in this fear place, you're not allowing yourself to grow and blossom into your authentic self. You are self-sabotaging. I would say picture yourself in this container, glass container, or however you imagine, and just imagine physically just shattering and then getting out and just woo, going out there. Create a visual for yourself if it's helpful. When you get stuck in those moments, say, I'm going to shatter and break out of this. You know what's a good book? And we will wrap our conversation because it's so fascinating. I love chatting with you.
Oh,
And not much of a coaching session, but I think overall, we're touching upon so many topics that people can explore on their own. And this is what I love about quote unquote coaching episodes. They're not necessarily, they turn into something else, which I love. A good book, if you haven't read yet, maybe you have, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, I really like it.
Yes, revisit that again. It will inspire you to just follow your dreams and live happily and create and all of
Yes.
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got the audio book actually. And another one, what I think is really good, I'm not sure if you've read it, is Brene Brown, The Gifts of Imperfection.
Yes, of course. Yes, it's on my nightstand. I frequently revisit it. Yes.
Yeah, she talks a lot of this, about I love a quote, about being in the arena, and I'm not interested in your feedback if you're not, getting your butt kicked in the arena too. And it's all that side of it, isn't it? And yeah, it's really helped me today, because I think a big part of my frustration is that moving out of my comfort zone, pushing forward and being brave, really, and sharing your gifts with the world and not playing small. And that, I suppose that's something you want to model to your children. You don't want to model to your children to play small and be afraid, do you? You want to show them and be an inspiration for them as well. So
Yes. And besides your children and modeling, and besides the benefit for yourself, there is the big benefit to the people. Imagine I played small and I was scared to even do coaching episodes, right? Because it's really scary if you think about it. But if I didn't do those episodes, people, it's a disservice to the people who really enjoy them, you
I
know?
know. I know. And, and I was a little bit nervous about today, and I know we've been trying to get it in for a while, but, there's a little part of me that could, like, I did think, I haven't really got time for it. And it's just excuses. And then you think, oh, it's scary. What if it all goes wrong or something comes out? But then actually I knew, because I love your podcast and I love the advice you give. And I do a lot of work in this field on myself, as I told you, about personal development. And I was like, no, actually, I think it'd be really good for me. And I love podcasts. This is the first podcast I've appeared on, but I'm obsessed with them. I love podcasts. So it's another thing where now I'm so glad I did it, but it's another thing pushing out my comfort zone today, coming on this podcast. It's just
Wow, yay. I'm happy. May this be the beginning of many, many pushing of the comfort zone. And with that, you expand and you grow and you grow and you feel that. And the fear feels diminished, just like in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, say to the fear, I'm the driver. You sit next to me. You be there, hang in there. Because if we eliminate fear completely, it's not good. Do it scared, and it's good. It's good. And only greatness comes from that, and you will be so fulfilled, believe me.
Oh, thank you, Anna. You've been amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me as well, and I am sending you a virtual hug, which is very safe. You will not get coronavirus. And what a timely conversation. We talked about everything. Be safe. May people who are suffering today with the coronavirus recover fast, and may the families, find ease and comfort, and everybody lessen their anxiety. That's my biggest hope. So thank you so much. I love you.
Oh, you too. Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.